everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is Congresswoman Mariannette Miller Meeks, who is a member of the For Country Caucus. Congresswoman, thank you so much for joining me.
Pleasure to be with you.
Congresswoman, I really appreciate the time today. I want to talk about healthcare and Venezuela, a really important conversation. I do want to start with the latter, though, because earlier today, all members of the House were briefed by leaders in the Trump administration on the U.S. operation in Venezuela that ultimately led to the capture and arrest of Nicolás Maduro. Start off the conversation, though. What can you tell us about what you learned in this briefing?
Well, first and foremost, it was a classified briefing, so I can't share with you what went on in the briefing, but I can tell you that as a 24-year military veteran watching this unfold Friday night or early Saturday morning, the first thoughts that come to my head were, is this a constitutional action? Is this a legal action? Is there a benefit to the people of the United States? Does this help protect individuals to the United States? And then is there international implications of this and a benefit globally and for national security on the global front? And in response to all of those questions, first and foremost, I felt the action was constitutional. There is precedent for this action before by both Democrat and Republican presidents. The first thing that came to my mind was the actions that President Obama took in killing Osama bin Laden, going into Pakistan. Pakistan was not aware that this was occurring. They had a mock-up of the compound, and so it was a great deal of preparation. As we know, that was a considerable military operation and very successful one. And then also further back to Operation Just Cause under President Bush, and that was there had been grand jury indictments of Noriega, and so Noriega was extracted from Panama and brought to justice in the United States. So certainly these types of actions have constitutional, have legal precedent, and the Supreme Court, in reference to Noriega, had found that the president's actions or the administration actions were legal and constitutional. So from those standpoints, I felt reassured as a person who was in the military at age 18, sworn an oath to defend the Constitution against enemies, foreign, domestic. I was assured of those. As far as the benefit to individuals, as a physician, a former director of the Department of Public Health in Iowa, where substance use disorder, mental illness happens, we know that there was over 107,000 deaths from drug overdoses. So, we campaigned, as did the president, on stopping the flow of illegal drugs into the United States, especially those by cartels, which had gained tremendous influence and power in both Mexico, Central America, and South America. That we saw the effects of Tren de Aragua and other gang members in the United States through the open border policies of the Biden administration. So certainly, as far as the safety and security of citizens of the United States, this is something that is beneficial to them and in alignment with what we had said during the campaign. And then I think often people forget that Nicolás Maduro was working with the cartels, working with transnational organizations, criminal organizations, was an illegitimate president, had an illegitimate administration. This was not just the U.S. This is not just a Republican president. Biden had the same thoughts and had increased the bounty on for capture of Nicolás Maduro, but also most foreign nations also considered him an illegitimate president, but more importantly, he was working in concert with Iran, Russia, and China, and especially in Iran, with giving safety to Hezbollah, doing things for Middle East terrorism. And so I think people forget about those actions that went far beyond Latin America and the selling of oil. And in response to the Venezuelan people, they sold oil at a discount to their favored partners. And so being able to have Venezuela sell oil on the open market by traders so that they're getting the full price of oil, I think is something that's going to benefit the Venezuelan people. And then in concert with the Monroe Doctrine, provides us more safety and security in Latin America.
I know that you said it's classified briefing. You really can't get into specifics here, but you left feeling reassured. I'm curious because some of your colleagues, mostly Democrats, said this was unconstitutional. Republicans, too, did have questions, though, on this attack, on this military operation after it. When you left, I mean, you're with Democrats and Republicans. What was the sense? What was the tone there? Were Democrats reassured as well? What did that really look like?
I think there were Democrats in the meeting. I can just tell you my feelings that were supportive of the actions, and there were Democrats who were not. But I would remind Democrats of what happened under President Obama. We did not criticize President Obama for going into a sovereign nation, Pakistan, without the approval of Pakistan, who did not know we were going into Pakistan to kill Osama bin Laden. Very similar actions, very similar activity, preparation far and ahead, no briefing to Congress that this was going to occur. So I would just remind them that both parties, both Republican and Democrats, have done actions such as these, and it has been upheld constitutionally for the presidents to do these actions. So I think, but I would say that for me and most Iowans, I do not want to see boots on the ground, but I have never heard the president talk about nation building in Venezuela or other countries. He's been very clear about that when he was last president, as well as coming into this presidency, that he is not interested in nation building or democracy building. But we do want to have a stable pro-Western government in Venezuela. That was the whole point of the Monroe Doctrine, is not to allow communism to be just south of the United States.
I know that you're not interested in boots on the ground in Venezuela, but it seems like there's mixed messaging when it comes to what the plans are for U.S. forces, because right after the raid was conducted, President Trump said, "We're not afraid of boots on the ground." A few days later, House Speaker Mike Johnson said, "We don't expect troops on the ground. We don't expect direct involvement in any other way beyond just coercing the new interim government to get that going." In this briefing or in your conversations with the Trump administration, the president himself, other colleagues, is there any clarity to what the plan is for U.S. forces?
Well, I can't comment on the president saying we're not afraid of boots on the ground, because I hadn't heard him say that statement. I've been asked about his comment to run the government, and to me, that's a signal. I don't take that comment literally. To me, what he's meaning is that we will help the government to provide security to Venezuela. And it's a comment more to cartels, to other transnational criminal organizations that have been working within Venezuela, and especially Russia, Iran, and China, that this is not a situation in which they need to take advantage, that we will help to provide some oversight until a legitimate government can be put in place. And we want to see that occur as expeditiously as possible. So that's the way that I take those comments. I mean, this was a brilliantly planned and executed operation with, as a surgical precision that required both tremendous intelligence, law enforcement, and military capabilities. It was, to me, a very Reagan-esque move. Peace through strength, and I would say there is signal and reverberations. I said that there will be ripple effects from this, not only throughout Latin America, but throughout the world. And I think both Russia and Iran and China were looking at this operation and surprised that the defenses that they had put in place in Venezuela were ineffective in deterring that this was going to occur. So I do think that there are repercussions and reverberations from this action, but which may in fact help us further deter any incursions in Venezuela.
President Trump did say after announcing Maduro's capture that the United States is going to run Venezuela until we can do a safe, proper, and judicious transition. That's what he said. I'm curious if this meeting or any conversations that you've had put some more meat on what that plan actually looks like, on how the United States is going to run Venezuela.
So again, I don't take that as a literal comment that we're going to run Venezuela. We're going to work with the existing people that are there while either the previously elected, legitimately elected president is put in place, or a new election takes place, to work with them. Again, I can't comment on what happened in the classified briefing, but again, let me just say that I was reassured that they're not going to be American boots on the ground. They're technically literally running the government. So from that standpoint, I think that there has been thoughtful consideration. As we know, Secretary Rubio is very skilled and very knowledgeable about Central and Latin American policies and governments. And so I feel very confident with the people that we have currently in leadership in the administration that will be able to help navigate this.
In this meeting, I am curious if Greenland was brought up, or within the past days, if you have had any new information on Greenland, because President Trump did say we need Greenland from a national security situation. It's strategic. The White House said that they are not ruling out using the military to acquire Greenland. Is there any information on that? Is there an appetite for the United States to acquire Greenland?
Well, since it did not come up in the classified briefing, I can say that it was not addressed in the classified briefing. But I will say that, Greenland is strategic to the United States. That doesn't mean that I believe that any other actions. I would just say that from the standpoint of shipping lanes in the Arctic, and from the standpoint of critical minerals and metals, that Greenland is very strategic from that point of view. But we've had very good working relationships with both Greenland and Denmark in that regard. So I think continuing the good relationships we have had and making sure that Greenland is secured is I think is important to the United States. So there is some strategic importance. I think that that is a true statement, but it did, as I said, did not come up in the classified briefing, at least not while I was there.
I think President Trump saying we're going to get Greenland is the opposite of trying to have that good relationship with Greenland, right? So our House Republicans, do you have the sense, are going to back President Trump on this or not support the United States acquiring Greenland?
I would say that, sometimes things are said and you just have to wait and see what ends up occurring. There have been conversations among Republicans, and I'm sure that those have been shared with the White House on Republicans' feelings about this. And I'm sure Republicans feel a variety of different things. But for most of us, we want to get our appropriations bills done. We don't want another continuing resolution. We're looking at doing another reconciliation bill. We're continuing to focus on lowering costs for the American people and looking at domestic issues. And that includes energy. And as we said, critical minerals and rare earths, critical metals are important for energy production, as are having open shipping lanes.
And I do want to move on to healthcare costs, because that's before all of this Venezuela news. That's what I originally wanted to speak with you about today. And as we remember, a few months back, the government shutdown showdown in October and November revolved around rising and high healthcare costs, specifically the enhanced Obamacare subsidies. They were set to expire at the end of 2025, and they did. But millions of Americans have seen their insurance premiums skyrocket. So where are Republicans right now when it comes to a plan to address high healthcare costs?
Well, you're correct in pointing out that millions of Americans have seen their healthcare costs rise, especially those in the commercial space, employer-based insurance, small businesses, and those that are self-insured. And none of those individuals are not in the exchanges, which only addressed a small percentage of the population. So addressing rising healthcare costs, I can tell you that's something I've worked on since I first came into Congress when I was sworn in January of 2021. What we've been working on PBM reform or pharmacy benefit manager reform is very important to lowering prescription drug costs, which will help lower overall healthcare costs for Americans and healthcare premiums. Other actions that we have taken, even including in the reconciliation bill, the Working Families Tax Cut, One Big Beautiful Bill. There were provisions in there both on some of the PBM reform, also direct primary care, also expanding health savings accounts, which is putting money towards people so that they can help to lower their healthcare costs. Remember that the House in 2023 passed the lower cost, greater transparency, looking at those things that are causing healthcare costs to rise. And so we know, if you track back to 2021, I brought this up in hearings since I've been in Congress, especially those in energy and commerce. President Obama got 4 Pinocchios from the Washington Post for 4 great lies. One, if you like your plan, you can keep your plan. Millions and millions of Americans lost their health insurance after 2010, after the bill was passed. If you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor. I can tell you as a doctor that in fact was not true, that we were going to bend the cost curve down. And the Unaffordable Care Act has never bent the cost curve down. And then lastly, that it was going to lower premiums by $2,500. Premiums have never been lowered. The premiums have skyrocketed. Meanwhile, these subsidies, especially the enhanced COVID era subsidies that have no income limit, go directly to very profitable health insurance companies. Meanwhile, premiums have gone up for Americans. So there's been no incentive for health insurance companies to accurately reflect or lower premiums. And the Affordable Care Act, which is why I call it the Unaffordable Care Act, was not designed to lower premiums. It was designed to increase consolidation, and the other regulations, part of it, have increased healthcare costs dramatically. So I think the additional bill that we passed in December, lowering healthcare premiums for All Americans Act, is getting at those things that will actually lower premiums. So the enhanced COVID era subsidies didn't lower premiums. They didn't lower healthcare costs. They just shifted who paid for them and were a thing to hide who was paying healthcare premiums and what the premiums would be. All of us, Democrats and Republicans, need to work on how do we actually lower healthcare costs, not just hide who pays the cost.
I think that's a really interesting point, right? Because realistically, how do you work together on that? Because I know your bill, the Lower Healthcare Premiums for All Americans Act, passed in the House at the end of the year. It's supposedly dead on arrival in the Senate because it doesn't address extending the ACA subsidies. What is the fix here? Because for months now, Republicans and Democrats have been at this real impasse when it comes to addressing these high healthcare costs. And I'm sure when you went home for the holidays, you had constituents, Republicans and Democrats alike, probably asking you, hey, what's the plan here? These costs are too high.
Well, I pointed to the things I've already done in Congress to help to lower costs that I'm continuing to do, the things that the Republicans have passed that have been stalled in, first, a Democrat-controlled Senate. I don't know if lowering healthcare premiums for all Americans, I would think that the Senate would take up the bill, because some of the things in the bill are things that Democrats have passed and voted on before. And so I think what's most important is to say, the COVID era tax credits benefited about 1.6 million Americans. What are we doing to the 130 and the 160 million Americans whose health insurance is not affected by these subsidies, which again are going directly to profitable insurance companies? So we really need to get on to how are we going to lower healthcare costs for everyone. I prefer that to be in a bipartisan manner. As you know, the Unaffordable Care Act was not bipartisan. As a matter of fact, it was passed through when there was a supermajority in the House. There was a supermajority in the Senate, controlled by Democrats until Senator Ted Kennedy died. And then Scott Brown was elected. So then it was pushed through by reconciliation. So it was a huge overhaul of, at that time, 17% of our economy. And it wasn't done in a bipartisan way, did not have Republican input. And so I think that it's important that we work on trying to lower costs. And there are things, as I said, in the Lowering Healthcare Premiums for All Americans Act, there are things in there that are that have been in Democrats supported before. We would like to see it come, because it will lower premiums even in the exchanges by 11%, but can lower healthcare costs by 30%. It's an important bill, and importantly helps small businesses, which the exchanges and Obamacare did not do. So small businesses were unfairly impacted as it favored large businesses. So to give the same treatment to small businesses as large businesses, I think is important. The stop loss insurance is very important in that, to when you're a small business, if you have one individual who has a catastrophic event that would dramatically rise your premium. So having the cost sharing reduction, which again was in Obamacare, it's something Democrats have supported, and the stop loss insurance, those things are really important to bring down cost. And I think that we can do that. And most importantly, as a doctor, I can tell you it puts patients and doctors back in the driver's seat, not insurance companies.
I was listening to an interview with Congressman Jim Jordan, and he said he wouldn't support a clean extension of the enhanced ACA subsidies. I'm assuming, based on you calling it the Unaffordable Care Act, you wouldn't either. But he did say if there was a package that offered reforms like increased choice and competition and helped all premiums, and then it had a temporary extension on the enhanced ACA tax credits, that's something that he could get behind. That seems like a compromise. I mean, is that something you too could get behind?
I think a clean extension with no reforms, again, it doesn't lower healthcare costs. And you're talking about a small fraction of individuals but you're not doing anything for the vast majority of Americans who are not on the exchanges. So you have.
But what if I'm so sorry to interrupt, but what if it's not clean? What if there's a compromise here where there's just a temporary 2 or 3 year extension here paired with and coupled with something that would help everyone else's premiums?
You have to see those reforms, and that's why it's so disappointing that none of the Democrats voted for lowering healthcare premiums for All Americans Act, because not only did it affect the exchanges and would help lower premiums in the exchange, but it would also help to lower premiums for those who are not in the exchange. And so, we have to see what a package would be. We don't have that right now. What we have is a clean extension, and a clean extension for Republicans, for most Republicans, is not something that, because it doesn't address rising healthcare costs. It doesn't lower healthcare costs for people on the exchange. It just changes who pays for it. But most importantly, it doesn't lower healthcare costs for the vast majority of Americans who are not on the exchanges. And that's the vast majority of people. So you've got 20 to 22 million people on the exchanges. That includes the ones that were added, the high income individuals that were added through the COVID era enhancements. But it does nothing to the 130 to 160 million people who are not on the exchanges. What are we doing about their healthcare costs? What's the Democrats' answer? Are you asking the Democrats, what are you doing to lower healthcare costs for this 130 million people? Because the numbers vary. Some say 130 million, some say 160 million, but the vast majority of Americans are not in the exchanges. And what's Democrats' plan to lower healthcare costs for them? Because that's what they put forth in the Obamacare, was that it would bend the cost curve down and it would lower premiums. That has never come about. Premiums have continued to skyrocket, even at a greater rate than they were prior to ruining the individual insurance market that was in place before Obamacare was signed into law.
I actually have been asking Democrats for months now, along with Republicans, all about healthcare. And I'm telling you, it's one of those, this is, to me, the only issue I've covered in the past couple of years. And I feel really lucky, right? We have these long conversations. We can get into it. I can see where there's areas of agreement. It does seem like there's this real gridlock when it comes to healthcare here, when it comes to Republicans and Democrats. So when you're talking to Democrats, is there any area where you can agree on other than, hey, healthcare costs are just too high?
As I said, there are things that have been bipartisan policies before in the past. We continue to work on that. I think there are Democrat members as well as Republican members who really want to see us do action on this and to lower healthcare costs. And so I think that there are things that we agree on. One of those I think that you've covered is PBM reform. There is bipartisan agreement on PBM reform. I can't say that there was when I came into Congress in 2021. I passed my first PBM reform bill as an Iowa State Senator. That was in 2019. And we're seeing fruits of that. It was only on the transparency part. I couldn't get the rebate part through. But even on the transparency part, we're seeing counties now that are saving money on their prescription drug costs because of what we did on transparency and for their PBM reform. And the reason why you look at it on the federal level rather than state by state is that states are being sued by PBMs, and so it's hard for them to get their reforms enacted. So we're going to continue, but that is an area of bipartisan agreement on PBM reform. There are other smaller things that there's bipartisan agreement on, but we have to move forward and start doing something. We can't just keep letting costs continue to rise for those individuals who are not in the exchanges. And I'm, from my standpoint, I've heard a lot about, 20 million people on the exchanges. I haven't heard anything from my Democrat colleagues on what we're going to do about the 130 to 160 million Americans who are not on the exchanges. And they could have voted for our bill, the Lowering Healthcare Premiums for All Americans Act, which had some components of things they have voted on before in the past, but they decided not to do that. And that would have been a good start. And maybe a good way to get onto bipartisan agreement is for Senate Democrats to vote on it. So at least 7.
You know this as a doctor, that healthcare transcends politics. But I am curious about the political implications here. Are you concerned for midterms at all? Because Republicans have a very slim majority right now. Republicans also have control of the House, the Senate, and the White House. So when people are looking at this and casting their ballot, do you think that when they see, as of now, there's no plan for healthcare, and of course things can change come November, come the midterms, do you think that this falls on your party?
Well, first and foremost, Brittany, let me just say no plan. What I do is that when I'm out in public, when I've done interviews, I point to the things that we as Republicans have already done to lower healthcare costs. We have already put forward bills, and Senate Democrats held them up. We continue to put forward bills. And what we did in lowering healthcare costs for All Americans Act is a response in what we need to continue to do. It was an extension of what we did in lowering costs, greater transparency. We passed that in 2023. So we did that before these subsidies were due to expire. So I think I point to the work that I have done, the work I've done both as a state senator, what I've done since I've come into Congress, attempting to lower healthcare costs, lower prescription drug costs, continue to get access for individuals, but also rooting out the waste, fraud, and abuse. And remember, our colleagues, our Democrat colleagues said there was no waste, fraud, and abuse within Medicaid. There is waste, fraud, and abuse. We're seeing that firsthand in Minnesota, but we know it goes beyond Minnesota. So tackling those issues, I think we can continue to tackle those issues. I think it's more important that I'm honest with the American people, that I have said very honestly that the COVID era enhanced subsidies do not lower healthcare costs. They do not incent the health insurance companies to lower their premiums, and they don't lower the premiums or lower healthcare costs for the vast majority of Americans that are not. And I will tell you that I've had people thank me for talking about them. I've had employers thank me for bringing up the fact that their premiums are rising. I've had people on that are on employer-based insurance. I've had small businesses thank me. So I've had a lot of people thank me for being honest about the situation and where healthcare costs are, and the fact that we need to look at all Americans, not just a small segment of the population.
And my last question to you, I started this part of the conversation noting that government shutdown back in October, November. It was the longest government shutdown in the history of the United States. There is a deadline to fund the government by the end of this month, just a couple of weeks away. Yes or no, do you think that there's going to be another government shutdown and another government shutdown revolving around these ACA subsidies or healthcare in general?
I would say that we're working very hard to get our appropriation bills done and through so that there is no need to bring up a continuing resolution. We've got 3 of those appropriation bills. Hopefully will be coming to the floor today. It's a little tenuous because of what has happened, unfortunately, with the passing of, Representative Doug LaMalfa, who is a great member of Congress and a wonderful person, wonderful family, rice farmer out of California, and then Jim Barrett's accident. But I think that those 3 appropriation bills will be coming onto the floor. We'll pass those. We're looking at getting all of the rest. There'll be 6 remaining. If we can get those appropriation bills done, and those, going through the appropriations process is bipartisan. People forget that. When it goes through the subcommittee process and the committee process, that's already working in a bipartisan fashion. So we don't, continuing resolutions, I can tell you as a military veteran, are not good for our military. So avoiding them, more so because it's not the best thing for Americans or Iowans, I think avoiding them is certainly preferred. So my thought is we're going to be able to get our appropriations done, and we're not going to have another government shutdown. Maybe I'm hopelessly optimistic.
Well, I really appreciate the conversation today. And as we see things happen regarding Venezuela, a potential government shutdown, anything revolving around healthcare, and much more, I hope you can come back on and break it down with me. You are welcome back anytime. I appreciate it.
Well, we'd love to come back. Thank you so much for the interview and your very insightful questions.